So Erica, thank you so much for joining us today. Why don't we start by sharing with everyone how we got here? So Newcastle Grammar's been a long-standing client of Aon's now since 1991 here in Newcastle. You are part of an education facility also known as EduPack, where we have about 500 plus schools across the country. And for us, it's more than just a suite of products, it's about a partnership with education. Why don't we start with a bit of detail about Newcastle Grammar and your role?
I've been the principal at Newcastle Grammar School for nearly 7 years now, and I have a school here that has a wonderful, wonderful history. We are the oldest independent school, and we've been here for over 100 years in the centre of Newcastle. And every day, over 950 students walk into this school, 200 staff, and we're a very, very busy place to be. And right here in the heart of Newcastle, we're also very much part of the Newcastle community.
So Erica, 7 years into the role, and I'm absolutely certain at one time or another cyber has been raised in discussion. So I'm curious, before you got to this event, how did the school view their own respective cyber risk, and had you invested any money in mitigating that? What were you doing around this space?
Look, you're absolutely right. 2020 was challenging for everybody, and cyber was one of the key things on our agenda. From a governance level, I've got a board member who is absolutely aware of this, works in the area, and was really keen that the school got on top of this. Yeah. And 3 months before the attack that we had, we'd undergone a full systems review, and this was part of our risk management. But nothing could quite prepare you for what was about to happen.
Yeah, so it sounds like from your perspective, you had done everything you possibly could. You didn't feel vulnerable and you thought you were as prepared as you possibly can be. And then November comes around. So at 7th of November, you are in the middle of the HSC on a tumultuous year. We've had COVID and homeschooling, which has probably left yourself, your students, your parents utterly exhausted from the year that has been. And it's a Saturday morning. Can you take us back and tell us what happened?
I remember it vividly. Mm-hmm. And I was interviewing staff for the 2021 school year, and I was online doing that. And I realised that things were disappearing in front of me. And I needed to make some calls very, very quickly. And our IT staff were very quick to respond. And my IT manager, within a few minutes, rings me back and says, "We've got an incredible problem." What he was looking at was the system being absolutely destroyed. And every part of our IT system was being encrypted. And there was nothing that he could do to stop this event from happening. After a few hours, he received a message, and it was a link to the dark web. And at the end of that message was a demand for ransom. And that demand for ransom was over $1 million in cryptocurrency. The demand was that we paid that within a week, and that they would then unencrypt our network. Yeah. At that point, I'm thinking, goodness, wasn't prepared for that one. What do you actually do? We had checked during the year that our cyber insurance was up to scratch, and that we had that. And it was my business manager who immediately said, "I think we need to ring Aon. They probably have an idea on where you go. There's not anyone really around at that point that can help you. And you're playing this sort of cat and mouse game with these criminals to try to prevent the attack, but we didn't have the expertise to do that." And the immediate thing was that we did get a specialist IT team that were used to doing this, and they could give us some advice. But you've got to rely on your own resources, and you've got to work through who can you get to help you. This is not something that you can fight by yourself.
So Erica, we'll put the cryptocurrency to the side for the moment. We will come back to it though, I assure you. When we have these sorts of events, sometimes we skim over the practical impact on an organisation and how debilitating this can be. Would you mind talking us through some of the restrictions you had as a business and how it affected your ability to operate?
We had no access to emails. We had no access to our landline phones. We had no access to photocopiers. Our security gates, every single part of our school did not work. And it's a Saturday morning, and I'm wondering whether we can actually operate on Monday effectively. And the answer was we didn't think that we could. We couldn't operate safely, and we couldn't operate in a way that was our core business, and that was to deliver education. And the group that I needed to communicate with were our parents, and that was an immediate, and I didn't have a system for doing that. It took me and the IT team until Sunday evening to find one system that sat outside this that had not been encrypted, and I could send a message to our parents telling them that this had happened and that I needed 24 hours where the majority of our students stayed at home that day. You've also got a number of problems at that moment, and that is, what does that do to parents who are wondering exactly what, not only the practicalities of I've got my child at home on Monday,
Correct, yeah.
but has anything been stolen here? Yeah. And if so, what has happened? We didn't know the extent of it.
And so let's touch on that parent point for a second. And as a mother of 2 children myself, I can't imagine the process of knowing that potentially personal records, medical details, education history. I mean, a cyber attack brings emotions to the table in general, but when you're talking about a school, I just don't think it gets more emotionally charged than that. So how did you handle that with the parents?
Look, this goes to the heart of who we are as an organisation and your reputation, but it also goes to the heart of how you want to communicate with this key stakeholder group. I decided that we needed to be very transparent, and I could not imagine down the track, if I wasn't transparent, having to tell people that this had been a cyber attack and those details had been stolen. As someone sort of explained it really well to me, it's like someone's actually invaded your home. They've come in through the back door. They've taken photographs of your children. They're looking at your banking details. Yeah. They've got things like birth dates and whatever, possibly. Now, we didn't know the extent of this, but you're absolutely right. There was someone in our home and we needed to secure that home, but you need to tell people that we might have a problem here.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's, I guess, one of those moments where communication was absolutely important. I was able to communicate in the first 24 hours, and then we worked on a communications plan that was virtually once every 2 days. After a few days, and we made sure that our parents knew what was coming back online so that they could communicate with us, but we also wanted them to know that we were doing everything possible to secure their personal details.
We know this. We know that cyber and brand and reputation do go hand in hand. We often try to explain this to our clients as the worst case scenario is you could end up on the front page of the newspaper. And unfortunately, that was the reality for Newcastle Grammar being on the front page. Can you talk about how you had to manage parents, students, staff, and now the media? How did you deal with that?
We knew that the criminals were watching us, and I had 2 problems then. Number one, I didn't want our parents to find out anything in the Herald before I had told them. And so that was part of making sure that I had that well and truly under control. The second thing was, though, that the criminals were watching, and I had to be very careful about what went into the Herald. Of course, they wanted to know how much money were we paying, all of these sorts of things. I couldn't give away any of those details at the time. And so because of my good relationship, the media actually gave me 2 days before they published. Then there was a media explosion. I had radio stations. I had people in Sydney contacting me wanting interviews. I think that you have to manage this really, really well. And I was very, very select in what I did. And that was another part of this that, yes, added definite complexity to the situation.
So we've had the cyber event, we've engaged our students and our parent community, we've dealt with our staff, we've now dealt with the media, we've triggered our insurance policy. how did we get the school up and running? And the question everyone would love to know the answer to is, did you pay the cryptocurrency?
Well, I think I better answer that one straight away. We did not pay. And we made an ethical decision right up front that we weren't going to support these criminals. As much as you are told that they will restore your system, you can't guarantee that. What we did do, though, was we almost quarantined the servers, and we began building a new system. And we began looking at how we might build this to better protect us in the future. And my IT staff were absolutely phenomenal. They worked just so hard. And within about a week, they had nearly every system back up and running. And we were online. We managed to run the HSC on the Monday. The HSC couldn't stop. Every resource was put towards rebuilding our system as quickly as we possibly could and minimising the impact.
So, Erica, I think we've covered a lot of the known impacts when a cyber attack occurs. I'm wondering if you can share with us some of the things that you weren't prepared for as an outcome of a cyber attack.
The first one I'd say is that I was very aware of the emotional impact on my team, particularly my IT team. But I wasn't prepared for the fact that they'd see it as a personal failure and they thought they were going to lose their jobs. And once you start realising that that's the way they're feeling when they're working just so hard and it wasn't their fault at all, that's actually something that we needed to be prepared for. I also wasn't prepared that it would go on and be as long as it was. And, you know, we're 9 months now later into this, and this is something we still live. And I think we'll be living it for quite a long time. Yeah. Yes, we're up and running in a week, but the impacts of this go for a very, very long time on your organisation. They lead to a number of key learnings. But I don't think I was prepared and understood that, really. I also think too that there was an emotional impact and an impact on everybody in our organisation at the time. And if I look at the way my staff were feeling by the end of the year, I think that that's something that you couldn't really have envisaged. You're busy managing all of these things, but they lost exams they'd written. They had to rewrite reports. They went on those Christmas holidays exhausted.
So, Erica, we're 9 months on, as you mentioned. Any key learnings that you think others could take away from this discussion and bring back into their own organisation?
Look, I think the first one is no matter how much you think you have this under control, you don't. Yeah. And you're fighting a criminal organisation with unlimited resources. And that in itself makes it impossible for a small or medium-sized business to combat. Yes, we were a bit naive, I think. We thought we had a great review of our systems. We were working through things to protect us more. We have a terrific IT team. But the first key learning is that this could happen to anyone. The second area that is worth knowing is that you have to have confidence in your IT, and you absolutely do. But this is a much wider thing than your IT staff and your IT systems. Cybersecurity in your organisation is something that needs to be understood by every member of your organisation. And for us, we've really learnt that we need to invest in staff understanding this at a much higher level than they did at the time. We don't know how this got into our system. We've got our ideas, but the system was so badly damaged, we've never found the absolute reason for it. But we know that we're only one click away from another incident. And we talked a little bit about reputation before, and if this happened again to us, that would be really, really terrible. And so we've invested really heavily, and we will be in the future in staff training in this area. I think the other key learning from this is that cyber attacks are on the rise. In the educational sector, in the last quarter of 2020, attacks like this went up 388%. I think that is a key thing that's come out of this, that the statistics are there, it is getting worse, and we need to continue to be in this space. It's not something that just happens and goes away. We also had to look at whether this was a data breach and report on that.
Yeah.
And where it didn't reach the threshold for a data breach legally, we felt we had a moral breach, and I felt that was a real distinction that we needed to make. And I think that goes to the heart of the way that you manage these incidents. So I did have to contact parents at Christmas time and let them know, not everybody, but let a group of parents know that we felt that some of the details had been stolen, that we were monitoring really, really carefully, and we've been monitoring the dark web since to see if any of that information is up there. It hasn't, thankfully. But this is something that doesn't go out of your mind. The other thing that I think we learnt from all of this is that to an extent you are alone. But the moment we made that phone call, we did get the specialist help we needed through our insurance broker. And to be able to get specialist IT and legal help in particular at this time was absolutely essential to the survival of our organisation. And so I don't think you ever come out of these things thinking anything other than let's learn from it. And that's the approach we've taken.
Erica, you mentioned there that it was Aon that you were able to get in contact with to get some answers and some guidance where you couldn't find it elsewhere. Can you talk about what a difference that made once you finally were able to talk to someone about this and have a pathway?
Look, it made all the difference, and I'm so relieved that we went down that path. You don't have many external people that you can contact, but Aon immediately was able to put us in touch with some specialist IT help. We were going to need, by the time this finished, specialist help in IT. The second thing that we were going to need was forensic IT. Now, not a lot of schools have forensic IT help in the school, and we needed somebody who was going to be able to go back and have a good look at what was stolen, how they got in, and that was something that we could do too through insurance. We also were going to need specialist legal help. We did not know whether it was going to be a data breach. We did not know what had been stolen, but we had a fairly good sense that we were going to need specialist legal help and communications help. And so when we made that first call to Aon, they were able to put us in touch with very different groups of people, though, that were specialists in this area, and that made all the difference.
And finally, Erica, one last question. So for anyone watching this today and wondering, how do I take this back into my organisation and get them to take cyber seriously, what advice would you give them?
Look, you've only got to pick up a newspaper or listen to things at the moment and know the statistics don't lie. This is happening everywhere. This is happening in a small part of Australia, in Newcastle. It's happening around the world. We have to take this seriously and understand that. All organisations do. The second thing I think is that you've got to understand that it's not an IT issue, it's a cultural issue, and it's an issue for everybody, as I've been saying. And it starts at the top of your organisation, and you can't be naive and think that you've got this under control. I also believe that don't wait till it happens before you reach out and get advice. Check your cyber insurance. Check that your systems are robust. Be working on this because it keeps everybody aware of it. And at the end of it all, just be kind to yourself. I look at it now and I can look back on it and say it was a really, really tricky time. But we got through it. And we got through it because we had great people around us, a team that supported us, and my staff and my students and my school community absolutely backed us. You do get through it, It sort of comes to an end, but it's something that you never probably really forget, and it's always going to be in your mind.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing this with us today. I think, firstly, we'd love to commend yourself and everyone, the staff, the students, the parents at the school, who have all handled this just incredibly professionally and with a lot of resilience. So well done. And finally, I think from myself and the team at Aon, we want to thank you for bringing to life this topic of cyber, which is often something you just read about and don't personally experience. So you've certainly done a great job of telling that today. So thank you so much, Erica.
Thank you.